What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Crypto Airborne in the house, dropping you guys the latest and greatest cryptocurrency news and updates. Today is, March 2nd, 2022. And we got another episode of the VGX Heroes Twitter Spaces education team. We're going to be talking about continuation of the last couple of weeks of history of money. And I should be talking about more modern day currencies and monies leading into the new world and whatnot. So should be pretty good show tonight. But I'm going to do a quick market overview. Started a little late. Had some things going on. So let's just jump in real quick. So let's see. Let me refresh it. Looks like we're down a little bit today. We're down about 0.05%. Bitcoin's at about $44,012. Ethereum's up 0.96% at about $2,964. We got XRP's down about 0.59%. Luna's up 1.87%, sitting at $92.76. And Solana up 1.18%, sitting at about $100. Let's take a look at our top gainers. We do have Goldfinch Protocol up 31%. Liquidity up 30.64%. And Bonfida up 21%. So, yeah, we got a handful of things that are up today, the last 24 hours, which is good. Losers, though, it's kind of a mix. Fetch.ai down about 10.79%. Alchemix down about 9%, sitting at $128. And APA3 down about 7.83%, sitting at $7.43. All right, today is March 2nd, 2022. Some of the holidays we got: it's Ash Wednesday, Adwa Victory Day, American Citizenship Day, International Rescue Cat Day, National Banana Cream Pie Day, Egg McMuffin Day, National Old Stuff Day, Read Across America Day, Stop Bad Service Day. Join us and let's work together to put an end to bad service. Yeah. Texas Independence Day, World Teen Mental Wellness Day, and it's Dr. Seuss's birthday. So a lot of different holidays going on today. Crypto bubbles. It's like a mix, a little bit of red, a little bit of green. ANC, Anchor Protocol, looks like it's up 20.2%. And Convex Finance is up 14.4%. And Osmo up 8.8%. Check out my favorites. Matic's up 2.8%. That's good. CKB's up 1.6%. Elron's up 2%, $153. BGX, those down 1.6%, sitting at $1.80. StormX is down 1.4%, sitting at about a penny and a half. All right, got 1 minute before we started. Total crypto market cap, let's see, 1.89 trillion. Let me just check CoinGecko real quick. It's usually a little bit higher. We're back above 2 trillion, so that's good to see. Fear and greed index, though, we did come down. Currently today, we're at a 39, whereas yesterday we were at a neutral 52. So a little bit of downfall today. Bitcoin dominance, though, trading sideways a little bit since yesterday at about 44.02%. So that's all I have for you guys for current market overview. I know we will be talking about current events and everything that's going on with Ukraine and Russia and whatnot. I think Aldo should be covering that. Maybe one of the other guys that we have that covers it. I don't know why I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But let's we got 8 o'clock on the dot. Let me pull up Edge because this seems to work audio better for whatever reason. I don't know why. But yeah, I'll just keep refreshing this until feel free to, write in the comments. I'll try to reply back as much as I can.
Hey, Frankie, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Hey, Sun Tzu, you want to say something so we can see if you're good?
Yeah, sorry, just so everybody knows, I just got these new Bluetooth earbuds or whatever, so I'm testing them out. Hopefully you can hear me. That's why I didn't say anything at first, because I'm trying to get everything set up, but hopefully it's all good.
No, you're good. Coming through clear.
What's going on, everybody? I see a bunch of heroes here. Littlefinger, Harry, Mr. Fantastic, Lagatha, Donnie Darko, Baroness, Aragorn, Airborne, Ray. Let's get Obi-Wan up here. Jack Nicholson, how you doing? Aldo, Sun Tzu, ready to get this thing going. Yeah. It's an exciting one today. I like history. Can't tell. Give us a couple minutes here, and we will get started soon. Let everyone trickle on in. What's up, Frankie?
That was a miscue there.
Oh, let's just call it a high five instead.
Excellent. Still getting used to the different emojis that Twitter has given us now.
Yeah, I've noticed some people are still on the old hundreds and fist bumps. I don't know if they just haven't updated their apps, or there's a difference between Android and Apple, or some secret menu I haven't discovered.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I saw that down arrow, and I was like, "Oh, this is different." I'm not quite sure it'll work as intended, but
You have a down arrow?
yeah.
That's new. I don't have that.
It's for comments. So if you look at like a tweet's comments, there's the down arrow to downvote kind of. It's a beta thing that they're testing out.
Pro tip for anybody speaking on Spaces: put your phone in Do Not Disturb, so incoming phone calls or messages don't interrupt your audio. That's a common occurrence on Twitter Spaces.
All right, I'd say we're just about ready to get started here. Let me go ahead and ask everyone to look at your phone. On the bottom right corner, you see that little blue feather plus button. Go ahead and hit that and retweet that this is going on. Retweet this is going on. That's what I'm going to do right now. Let's see. Join us. Okay, tweet. Boom. That's that. All right. Well, welcome to the VGX Heroes Education Spaces. Wow. Do re mi fa sol la ti 1 2 3. Welcome to the VGX Heroes Education Spaces, episode 5, season 2. Today we're talking about the new world, the history of money. We're picking up where we left off last week, which was, the fall of the Roman Empire, all the way through the Dark or Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. So we're picking back up after that point. We may be jumping a little bit, but we got some good fun stuff. So let me go around and introduce the panel. We got Obi-Wan. Why don't you say hello?
Hello, I'm Obi-Wan, Jedi Master that likes to do teaching to the Padawans, and yeah, happy to talk about Fed coupons today and the continuation of the history of money and how that's transpired over to the New World, the Americas, and looking forward to the interactive AMA portion that follows.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Obi has been dying to do this education space. This one is a very passionate one for him. Aldo, what's up, buddy? How you doing? Our foreign affairs guy.
Thanks, Floki. Good evening, everyone. I will be covering foreign affairs tonight, so I'll be discussing everything that's taking place overseas and how that impacts macroeconomics and the crypto space.
Frankie, Jack Nicholson. Hey, what's up?
Thank you, Floki. Jack Nicholson here, and I will be bringing you current events, which there are plenty.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The man behind the mask. Why don't you say hi?
Hola, amigos. I'm Sun Tzu. I do social media stuff, and these are the smart people that I hang out with in hopes that I will become smart too.
That's pretty smart of you, I'd have to say. Surrounding yourself by smart people. I'm with that. That's what I'm doing too. And I am Floki, the VGX Hero Boat builder. Founded this cool little community with Aragorn and Maximus, and I'm just a Viking that speaks from the heart, crypto Viking that speaks from the heart, and I'm excited to get this going. Shout out to Crypto Airborne, who is recording this space. As always, you can check out his YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and like. I think he's streaming it as well. No, I know he's streaming it as well. Excuse me. And let's get this ball rolling. Jack Nicholson, Frankie, what's going on in the world?
Thank you, Floki. Well, today marks almost to the hour the first week of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, or the end of the first week of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. I swear I can speak. We saw volatility in both equity and crypto markets. And additionally, we saw a clear negative correlation between these two markets, where the equity markets behaved, may I say, rationally, kind of as if inflation and geopolitical issues mattered again. And Bitcoin acted as an inflationary hedge, and showing that it had a real world use case of being a store of value to individuals that have been cut off from the banking system. Now, regardless of what you think of the governments in this conflict, ordinary citizens are just the innocent bystanders and should not have to deal with the consequences of their government's debt-fueled wars. Now, since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Bitcoin soared from 34,000 to 45,000, as global sanctions has given rise to demand for alternative stores of wealth, which of note coincides perfectly with the 100-day moving average of Bitcoin. And then, as we saw in the past with Turkey, individuals that live in a country with hyperinflation have been able to preserve some of their wealth by allocating to decentralized currencies, again, such as Bitcoin. You're seeing this in context of Ukraine and Russia. It's being used as humanitarian purposes. Now, last Sunday, the Minister of Digital Transformations of Ukraine urged global cryptocurrency exchanges to block all accounts belonging to Russian nationals. And that was followed by the Biden administration now asking crypto exchanges to help monitor transactions that may be used by Russian individuals or entities to avoid sanctions, likely many of those sanctions likely. Many of these exchanges pushed back, thankfully, against these calls to block or freeze transactions in Russia. Let me reiterate what I just said, that the ordinary Vlad should not be held responsible for their government's debt-infused war games. Binance was the first crypto exchange to decline the request, stating that they are, quote, not going to unilaterally freeze millions of innocent users' accounts. Crypto is meant to provide greater financial freedom for the people across the globe. They will, however, be blocking accounts of those on the sanctions list and ensuring that all sanctions are met in full. Two other major crypto exchanges, Coinbase Global and Kraken, also declined the request from Ukraine. The CEO of Kraken stated on Twitter that the company cannot freeze the accounts of our Russian clients without a legal requirement to do so. In addition, in a slightly, I call it lighter moment, when Hillary Clinton was asked to give her opinion on this matter, she claimed that she was disappointed, at which point Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, stated that he was happy, in good health, and absolutely not feeling suicidal at all. A Coinbase spokesman told Reuters that the major exchange will not institute a blanket ban on all Coinbase transactions involving Russian addresses. Now, on the Fed front, Powell told Congress that a 25 bip rate hike in 2 weeks is in the bag. Well, we've heard this before. Earlier today, in the latest Fed Beige Book, validated the cheerful economic outlook. Okay, noting that based on information collected before February 18th, 2022, U.S. economic activity expanded at a modest to moderate pace since mid-January. I wonder if his position will change following the Ukraine war. Inflation, everybody's favorite, remains the big problem, of course, with prices changed to customers increased at a quote-unquote robust pace across the nation. A few districts reported an acceleration in prices. Well, I could have told you that on my grocery bill. So with that, I will leave it to Aldo with some current affairs news.
Yeah, gas was $5 today. It was ridiculous. Cost $75 to fill it up, and I'm in a 4-door tiny little car. It's ridiculous. Sorry, just me venting. Aldo, go ahead.
On that note, sorry, Aldo, I don't want to cut you off. The pain's not going to stop. That as oil, Brent crude, increased another $10 today, topping I think an all-time high, at least in the last 10 years.
Okay, today in foreign affairs, I'm going to cover a bit of what Frankie just mentioned as well. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail. So it's been 7 days, almost to the hour. I mean, I think we were in a space last week, right when this kicked off. So armed fighting broke out in Ukraine 7 days ago when Russia invaded. They conducted a blitzkrieg-style invasion where they invaded from the north, south, east, and west in an attempt to decapitate Ukraine. So that's what happened a week ago. Today, Russian paratroopers dropped into Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, and they have captured, allegedly, according to Russian sources, they've also captured the city of Kherson in the south of Ukraine. That's significant because it's an economic center, and it's also a geostrategic port city, as it sits at the mouth of the Black Sea. So it's very important for Russia. And incidentally, it also houses the office of the Ukrainian president's representative in Crimea. So that's all significant from a geopolitical standpoint. Now, in the West, what has taken place and what's been going on in the West? In the West, today there was a United Nations General Assembly vote, 141-5, with 35 abstentions to basically call out Russia and demand they stop the war. Now, this is largely symbolic, as Russia is a permanent member on the UN Security Council and cannot be removed. So this is not legally binding in any way, and it has no teeth. So that took place today. Regarding Germany, which is at the center of this energy debate, we mentioned it last week with the natural gas pipeline from Russia. Germany has pivoted and has taken a much more aggressive stance towards Russia. Specifically, they have joined other nations in terms of arming and sending arms to Ukraine to fight Russia, and they have also pledged to become energy independent. So that is what's taking place in Germany. In the Far East, today the U.S. Air Force conducted a military exercise at Kadena Airfield in Japan in a show of force in order to deter a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan. So that is something to be aware of as well. The U.S. is concerned that China might take advantage of the current situation in Ukraine. Sanctions have been imposed by the West, United States, and many other UN nations. Specifically, several Russian banks have been banned from the SWIFT system. This is already having impact on the citizenry of Russia. Many of them are unable to withdraw money from the banks and from their ATMs. If the bank that they patronize is on that list, they have been unable to withdraw money. And also, Apple and Google Pay have barred services in Russia. So you're seeing the effect of that in a multitude of ways. You're seeing metros where people can't use their Apple Pay to get on the metro, and it's causing issues in terms of transportation. Forex. the ruble weakened by 6.73% versus the dollar, which is at 114.29 according to Refinitiv data. The euro was down about 1% as well, and the dollar was down 0.1% against the yen. Incidentally, Bitcoin was up 4%, so that's good. Crypto, how is this affecting crypto? Aside from proving the use case for Bitcoin and digital assets, we're seeing exchanges, the largest international exchanges such as Binance, Kraken, Coinbase, and others, refuse to blanketly ban services to clients in Russia, stating that it's essentially antithetical to the entire ethos of Bitcoin and crypto, and that you shouldn't punish the citizenry for the actions of their government. So that was good to see as well. And lastly, on a positive note, 14 out of 20 of the $26 million donated in crypto to Ukraine has already been dispersed through multi-sig wallets and is being utilized and is being received by the people that need it. So that's a positive thing. And that's all I have for foreign affairs.
Could I ask some question about your sources that you use to find this stuff, as well as, do you have an example of some of the things that you said people who need it? Were there specific examples that you saw in your readings of what they were getting it for?
Yeah, so regarding sources, I pull from international news sources in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. So I look at British news, French news, German news, Middle Eastern news, and I just I get a smattering from different countries, and I basically find, I sift through that, parse it, and report what's been reported in multiple sources. So it's not just, unidimensional or circular reporting. Now, with regards to the organizations that's been dispersing this, I want to say it was a charity that it was like an exchange, or it was a charity that was set up, and I think they're trying to turn it into a DAO, essentially, from what I saw earlier. I'd have to go back and find the name, but I can do that and follow up for next week's AMA.
Very good. Appreciate you and Frankie, you guys bringing us the news from around the world and all those macro and political and crazy stuff that's going on here. It's easy to forget, being in our own little happy little VGX hero bubble. And thank you for bringing reality to us. And I guess here comes the fun part. Obiwan, take us back in time, and let's go to the New World together, even though the Vikings were there first.
Even though the Vikings were there first, there's a lot of recent discovery about that, and you're probably right. But even before the Vikings, there were people here in the New World or the Americas before that. So, anyways, history is through the eye of the victor. Yeah. Oftentimes the other side of the story gets left behind. So last week we touched on monetary metals, and we had gone, through previous weeks, moving from Rari, the Yap stones and the Rari beads, and denarius and oris from the Roman times, and basically around this era of expansion in Europe, there was a mine in mid-Europe that there's a duke that had like this massive pile of silver, and he started minting these coins. They were called thalers. Sounds very familiar to dollars, right? And these types of silver coins were utilized by a lot of countries, often tying back to some weight of gold or national currency, and that led to expansion into the new worlds as France and England and Spain were all fighting for naval supremacy and dominating trade, and so that led them to the New World. And you had, of course, Spain heavily in Central America. That is mostly where they ended up, and also some part of the northern end of South America. And they discovered vast amounts of gold by the Mayans and Aztecs, indigenous people to the area. And, they became, pretty bloody and, going to war for that gold and for those resources, and pretty wealthy. And that's basically how a lot of those countries became what we now know as Mexico and the surrounding countries in Central America, and some of the northern countries in South America have those roots of the Spanish money. And that was no exception for the New Americas, because the British colonies and the French colonies originally started out using some of those francs and Great British pounds, right? And the whole thing with the pirates, right? The trade moving from Europe over to the Americas is that it's expensive to have monetary metals and transport them securely from one continent to another. It's a dangerous trip. It's always taken great resources to safeguard the monetary metals. And the term "the pieces of 8" came from the pirates, right, where you used to be able to exchange 8 pieces of silver essentially for each gold coin, and that was kind of the going rate for Spanish money at the time. And what happened is with the expansion of Europe, of Great Britain, and moving out into all the different areas of the world, the Americas and the Caribbean, and trade with India and Africa, they were kind of stretching themselves thin. And what they started to do was outlaw the export of their currency, of their monetary metals. So it concentrated the wealth on the island, and then some of these colonies and satellite states became more based in commodities trade or in foreign currencies. And that's really what the first types of monies that really kind of took hold in the colonies was really Spanish money. So you had Spanish coin and Spanish dollars. And when the United States declared its independence against Great Britain, being is that there was a lot of the money that was concentrated in England itself, and the colonists were left trying to find a way to pay for their independence. They started a currency, and originally this currency was tied to the Spanish dollar, and it was called the continental currency. So it was, much like a dollar, it was like a piece of paper that had some sort of certification on it. And this was issued, and it was used to pay for the war. And as you can imagine, as the wars prolong and get more expensive, the more and more dollars that they print, or currency that they print, the less valuable it becomes. So by the end of the American Revolution, there's a famous term that was used where, it started off that it was tied to the dollar, but by the end of the war, it had come to just 1/40th of the face value of a Spanish dollar. So there was a term called, "Hey, that's not worth a continental." So if you've ever heard that phrase from history, it goes back to the very first currency issued in the Americas by the Continental Congress. So that's kind of how we paid for the war. Of course, securing trade and allies with France, who were also, not on friendly terms with England. So moving from the continental currency, we going back to that Thaler dollar explanation, the Continental Congress had an issue on their hands because the Continental wasn't worth anything, and so they went back to the good old standard form of money that we talked about previously, which was silver and gold. And we remained on silver and gold for a very long time, really, up until we started printing reserve notes. And really, this is around the time of the American Civil War. And during the Civil War, again, you're going to see a recurring theme here, is that whenever there's war, all of a sudden these fiat currencies, which are usually start off as being pegged to some form of coin that is a precious metal, due to prolonged war, they continue to lose value through inflation until they're virtually worthless. This happened in the Civil War when they were looking for how they're going to fund that war. So the North, they started what was called the greenback. It was just basically a note that was redeemable again for silver, and the Confederacy issued their grayback. So they had a form of money in the South, and there's a form of paper money in the North. And then, of course, as you could imagine, when the winning side wins, the losing side's money goes to zero. So the very first form of green paper money, as we know it, started, in the Civil War era as a greenback. There was many attempts to kind of come up with, reserve notes between really the end of the Civil War and the turn of the century, when most of the world actually went to returned to kind of the golden era of a gold standard, from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, pre World War I. There was kind of a golden era there of, most countries in the world, being on a gold standard, having their national currencies or notes tied to gold, or just exchanging, silver. And that was a really prosperous time for most of the world, up until you get into the World War I era. And Michael, feel free, if I see you joined, feel free to jump in if you think I'm too light on the details and want to go deeper.
No, you're good. Sorry, I was a little bit late joining. Had a little bit of car issues tonight, but I knew this was going to be your night to hold down the floor anyway, so you're doing just fine.
All right, no problem. So there's really good prosperity that happened, post the Civil War. Europe was doing pretty well. The late 1800s, late 19th century was a very prosperous time, up until you get to really the beginning of World War I. And, what happens again in times of war? What's the recurring theme, right? Well, they start breaking away from a true gold standard, and they start fractionalizing the reserves. So they start issuing currency. It's still redeemable for gold, but it's becomes less so as they inflate the currency. They have to hold less in reserve, and eventually there's more currency in circulation than can be redeemed for the underlying peg. And that's an easy explanation of a fractional reserve. So what happened was, in World War I, the reason that war lasted so long was because they basically just infinitely financed it by printing more and more fiat. Well, it wasn't fiat at the time. It's just they just continued to devalue the circulating currency, and that basically went until the end of the war. And then they kind of go back into some recovery, and start taking notes out of circulation, things stabilize a little bit, people can breathe. And then America was hit with our own little problem after the Roaring 20s, and we saw the Great Depression happen. And what happened is that in Europe, a lot of these countries after World War I were no longer on a pure gold standard. They'd strayed from it with the fractional reserves, and they continued to print more money. And the American notes were not worth as much. They devalued our dollar because we were on a gold standard. So what happened was,
that's one spot where I will jump in just to kind of really hammer home the extent to which that affected different places unevenly too, because the currency depreciation throughout the World War I period, the United States dollar was depreciated by 3.44% over that period of time. But the European currencies at that same interval, for example, the UK was depreciated by 6.6%. The French currency was 9%. The Italian currency 22%. The German currency 48.9%, and the Austrian currency, just within the period of time of World War I, was depreciated by 68.9%. So that really started much of the disparity that then followed into the next period of history.
Right. So we were at a disadvantage because they had more money in circulation. And, they wanted to arbitrage essentially our gold reserves, right? So, and this led to the Gold Reserve Act of 1933, where President Roosevelt basically outlawed the export of gold. So revoking the universal legal tender status for debts and private ownership. So basically that was like, we closed our doors to having foreign currency exchange come in, switch to dollars, take gold, and then take gold out of the country. So we had to stabilize our country as we were exiting that Depression era. I will go back to I didn't touch on it, but the actual dollar in the Federal Reserve that actually exists today was actually started in 1913. Interesting fact that prior to that, you didn't actually have, there was different forms of dollars in existence, but the Federal Reserve notes, which is what we know today as the currency, that started in 1913. All right, so President Roosevelt basically said no more gold redemptions in 1933. This, sanctions and reparations against Germany for the First World War sent them into a very deep depression, which once they were able to get people of fighting age again, and they were hammered on so much, it kind of led towards another rise up and another World War II. And in World War II, everybody leaves the gold standard essentially and prints money and goes to figure out how they're going to pay for the war, which of course happens through inflation, just as it always does. Every time there's a war, there's inflation, whether it's the Romans clipping coins or the Continental going to zero, or dollars to fight World War I or World War II. More currency is inflated. The true winning and outcome of the World War happened in post-World War World War II, 1947. There was an agreement called the Bretton Woods Agreement, where the U.S., being the victorious saviors that we were, saving Europe from speaking German, we were basically awarded as the stronger economy, the less destroyed through the war. Right? We fought on conflicts, but our homeland wasn't touched, and we were economic and big producer of goods that the world needed in order to rebuild and recover. So having the strongest economy and being the knight in shining armor that we were, there was a big debate in World Council that happened in Bretton Woods, New Jersey, And that resulted in the United States dollar, which used to be on a gold standard, which was redeemable for gold, becoming the de facto global reserve currency. So that means that the other countries, because the United States had a bunch of gold in reserve, and because we had a strong economy, and because our dollar was redeemable for gold, they didn't have any problems holding dollars in reserve in their banks because they knew it was as good as gold. And this gold standard era of the dollar lasted, 24 years until 1971. A history of continuing to expand dollars a little bit more than what the stock to flow of gold was in our gold treasury. It started devaluing the currency. We entered Vietnam in the mid to late 60s. Things got a little bit more expensive. The post-World War II, we were fighting a Cold War, that's what Vietnam was about, right? Trying to stop the spread of communism and show that our form of democracy was the preferred way to spread freedom throughout the world, which we all know is tied back to money. And President Nixon had really no choice but to remove the world from the gold standard, which happened in 1971. And the world was taken off the gold standard in 1973. So since then, we've been on a system of true fiat system. So now government issued currency is no longer redeemable for gold, which has been the standard of money now for a couple hundred years in this example. And fiat means by decree. In other words, it's because I said so. It's a shared social construct that this money is worth something, and that it's redeemable for our labors and goods that we produce, and that we honored to be paid for taxes and for global trade, so long as people have confidence in that Fed coupon that is backed by nothing, which is why I call it a Fed coupon. It's literally a Treasury Reserve note. It's an issuance of debt, and that debt is bought in the form of bonds, usually for a nominal coupon interest payment on top of that bond, and that's how dollars go into circulation. When the dollar kind of first started, when we had a gold standard, there's only $600 billion out there. Move to today when there's 20 to 30 trillion dollars in circulation, and that amount's gone up 65% in the last 5 years. So as you imagine, when goods are valued in fiat and fiat continues to expand at a torrid rate, things become more expensive, and that's where you get inflation and lower cost of living or higher cost of living, and your purchasing power dwindles. So we're being taxed through debasement. It's an involuntary tax, and it's one that is kind of coming to an end here. Throughout history, fiat has lasted up to around 100 years. If you think that the dollar was, 1913, the Federal Reserve notes were established. In 1973, the world went off the gold standard. So we've been on a true fiat world system for really 50 years now, 49 years for the world, a couple years longer for the US. So we're really kind of waiting to see, how long is this charade going to last? Are we ever going to return to a gold standard? That's that's the debate, right? Is how can you even return to some kind of a reserve standard? How do we exit? Those are all questions that I think we're in that era of discovery right now, and why the world is starting to turn to digital assets. The newest form of fiat will be the central bank digital currencies. We could probably have a longer discussion on what that would mean, but you want to have ultimate surveillance by the state, and indentured servitude to your government lords than try a central bank digital currency. Fed coupons are obviously, because they continue to lose money, lose purchasing power, they're literally eroding before our eyes. So that is why people are moving to mathematically sound money, which is, Bitcoin and other digital assets that have scarcity and supply determined by math and code and decentralized governance, which is, free from government control and manipulation. So feel free to hop in and add color there, but I think that's a good pausing point. They're trying to sell us death sticks, Floki.
I was waiting for it. There it is.
Death sticks. Fed coupons. They're literally robbing us of our time. Robert Breedlove has a really good quote that it's, I put it up on my Twitter. I'm going to go grab it real quick. But effectively, inflation is legalized counterfeiting, but counterfeiting is illegal inflation. So I thought that was a pretty good quote.
Yeah, I think, thanks for that. I think that a lot of this period of history too really kind of, the story kind of exploded once we got into the World War I and then the interwar area and World War II. But in that same period of time, we got to remember too that other major points in at least American history happened, and world history too, with the stock market crash in 1929, the Great Depression. What this situation became the breeding grounds for was just the proliferation of Keynesian economics, because there was no other way for them to dig their way out of the hole that they had created for themselves other than to just explain things away through spending. So it was a period of history very ripe for, I would call it almost like narrative kidnapping, because if you go back to that period of history, you had the Hoover Roosevelt election with FDR, where FDR actually ran on the premise of monetary responsibility, and it was Hoover who was the interventionist. And then once Roosevelt actually won, he actually just took over the platform that his opponent had run on and just ran with it. And it brought in this Keynesian just deluge of just spend. You just got to make sure you die before the check comes. So that premise really had been, we had been fairly Austro-economic prior to that point in history. Mm-hmm. And it opened the floodgates for this just wave of Keynesian economics. And Keynesian economics is not partisan either. I mean, it's been applied by the left, the right. It's been at times championed by Republicans, by Democrats. It's not a partisan issue in the way that many might assume, because I think regardless of the party that gets in power and whether they consider themselves to be conservative, quote unquote, or not, once they have power, they want to be able to access the checkbook to spend it on however the hell on whatever they see fit. So the term conservative falls off once the elected party actually wins power. And if they have those Keynesian leanings, it just, you look at the periods of history where that just opened the floodgates for just blame everything on, like, Keynesian economics to me means you don't have to be responsible for the past or the future. Just take a snapshot of the present and have whatever you want, man. Like, it's all good. We'll figure it out. Just spend more now. The past never happened, and the future's never coming. To me, that's the basis of a Keynesian argument. But I'm not sure. I'm curious to get your take on how Keynesian economics kind of just became a virus that infected economies across the world.
But Keynesian economics is basically the principles by which all governments operate today.
Yeah,
it's all about spending. After Bretton Woods, there was deflation in your dollar, going back on a gold standard, and that was a great time of economic prosperity. When we had a gold standard, wages, kept pace with the stock to flow of money and new currency issuance. Everything went relative to the amount of goods produced in the world. And, up until about when we went off that gold standard, we used to have pretty fair reporting on actual GDP and jobs reports and inflation. And then those numbers have all been manipulated heavily since we left the gold standard to make things give the illusion that, the Fed coupons are still a decent way to transmit value over time, which we all know is, through these sessions and discussions we're having, is a complete and utter lie. They're literally robbing us of our most precious resource, which is our time and our liberty. Our liberty being, our present freedom, right? If zero tax is complete freedom and 100% tax is complete slavery, and most of the world is falling in between the 20 and 60% range, what does that make all of us? Some form of slavery, right?
Cogs in the chain.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we should all be so lucky to have taxation under 30%.
What's the WEF campaign right now? You'll, in the year 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy with it.
Yeah,
right?
like literally own nothing.
Isn't that genuinely an actual thing that they're spinning as a positive? That's the future. That's the Keynesian wet dream right there.
Yeah, you own nothing, and things will be provided to you on a needs basis, so long as your government overlords have determined it necessary. When you have no freedom in the matter, and you have no property, because they basically, the only way out of this mess is to tax the hell out of everybody or move to a different monetary system entirely and just have a reset. Which is hopefully more the way we're going, is that if everybody opts out of the fiat system and we move into a public money system that's peer-to-peer and distributed and fair, and we just no longer continue to participate in that failed fiat system, governments are going to have to adapt or die. And that's the hope, right? That's why we're in this in the first place. Or if it isn't, then welcome to a reality check. That's what crypto is really all about, and digital assets are really all about. It's not about making, tons of money. It's about having a fair system where our liberties and our time are not robbed from us.
Makes you take a moment and think about the system that we're in, right? And that we're so used to. It almost feels like an illusion, right? That Michael, they would say, forget about it, don't worry about it, kind of state of mind that we're all just complacent and just getting through because we're chasing that dream. And they encourage us just to grind and work hard, and everything will be okay. But we can't seem to keep up, especially people not investing in assets that grow. If you're not investing, you're screwed, and it's scary, and it doesn't feel right at all. I see your mic's off. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, you bring me back to kind of where we started with these whole, curriculum-driven units that we've started here on the Twitter Spaces. So let me ask you something to kind of review back to week one. So if the monetary system and the way that Keynesian economics is being used, and now, I mean, it's just on steroids. If you can't really pay attention to the past, then you can't really take for granted the future. You're incentivized to essentially operate in the present. What are we doing programmatically to people's time preference? Hello. The entire nature of the system that we're currently in right now is to reprogram or program from scratch, basically de-evolve people to not think about any kind of future investment, because you can't necessarily forecast to project wealth into the future, to transport value into the future. So it incentivizes this same day spending and instantaneous spending. And really that's what the current model relies on. Spending stops and, oh my God, the sky's falling. It's full blown Chicken Little. We have to almost create a stigma and disincentivize people from saving. And what do we think? We're skipping ahead a little bit to the future, and I know we're trying to leave tonight off here at 1971 so we can come back next week and really just hit. We've talked about WTF happened since 1971. Since we started doing these AMAs, I think next week we're going to dedicate a whole 2 hours to it and just pick apart piece by piece by piece, all the things of society that have just fallen off a cliff that most people wouldn't necessarily correlate to something like monetary policy. But if we get into CBDCs going into the future, and let's not even go down the rabbit hole of social credit score and whether or not you could spend money based on what you thought that day or who you supported that day. Let's take that whole nuclear aspect of the conversation away and just look at the fact that you're looking at a CBDC that could potentially have an expiration date, where they could even further accelerate Keynesian tendencies by putting an expiration date on your money. It's taking what happened in Europe with NERP and negative real rates on money in the bank and accelerating that. And it's always been discussed from the perspective like, well, what if China did this with the digital yuan? What do we think we would do in any other part of the world? You're telling me that if the economy relies on spending in order to continue to keep up the facade that everything's okay, that any other part of the world would take the moral high ground over China and not introduce some type of a incentive to spend before your money devalued itself, or before if your CBDC had an expiration date? Please. I mean, that's the direction that this goes. That's why to me and to many others in the space, CBDCs are a hill to die on. That's a binary issue. There is no coming back from, like, that's one of those things where the incremental damage that could be caused by a CBDC is insurmountable to the average person. It is not something that you could walk back from.
Yeah, if you give up your rights to a CBDC, you're giving up. I mean, it's like what we gave up involuntarily by not fighting the gold standard. And yeah.
Let's remind everybody what that stands for again. CBDC.
Sure. It's so CBDC is a central bank digital currency. So essentially eliminating cash money from the system and essentially having a central bank digital currency to replace the dollar, where every dollar that you have could be turned on or turned off at the will of the controlling entity or controlling power. And there's nothing saying that smart contract conditions couldn't be applied to a CBDC to introduce an expiration date or a depreciation schedule where if you don't spend it by this date, it depreciates X%. And it becomes programmatic money, which means that it becomes a programmatic population. So that's why they're less flatteringly referred to as CBDCBs, which is central bank digital cuck bucks, because you essentially at that point become at the mercy of the state and whatever they tell you can and can't do with your money.
Yeah, it's surveillance. It's surveillance state-run stipends, basically. Like you get a state allowance for your labors, and then that allowance has to be spent in such amount of time, or on only a government-approved goods, because they're sanctioning goods from other places, and you can't get access to them, and your choices can be extremely limited, and not only what you can buy, but what you can spend and when you can spend, and it would be the ultimate loss of freedom.
Yep. And it's full blown panopticon at that point. It's just everything that you do is completely in the view of your captor at that point. It's pretty dystopian if we were to elect to proceed down the path of CBDCs without any alternative. It's full dystopia, and I think that most people just don't realize it yet.
What's going to happen is they're going to have to force controls in the short term, because inflation they can't come back from. Right now, even where we're at, like, we have to produce more goods and stop printing money in order for the inflation to really kind of not be a problem. And last time I checked, we weren't producing enough real goods. We produce a lot of intellectual property, and we spend a lot of money on other people's stuff because we traded a trade. We're at a trade deficit. We import more than we export. And so, the rest of the world sends us a bunch of stuff, and we continue to print more money and devaluing the stuff. But eventually, the debt becomes so much that they come and call on the debts, And then they have to tax the hell out of everybody or introduce something like a CBDC in order to keep people under the thumb of the government in order to pay off the debts. But otherwise, the country just collapses and everything in the country becomes for sale.
Obi,
Go ahead, Aldo.
Obi or Michael or anyone on the panel, could you explain the difference between the current digital dollar that we have, as we all know that, you know, banks don't have all the cash reserves, and largely, I mean, we're almost a cashless society. Most people don't carry around cash. Could you discuss the difference between the digital dollar as we have it and a CBDC, and what the key differences are between that, and why it is such a it is such a big deal, or such a big difference between that and what we currently have? Because I think that most people will hear CBDC and they'll go, "Oh, we already have it's all ones and zeros in a computer." That's like the same thing. So I think most average Americans won't really grasp the stark difference between the two.
So a CBDC, well, okay, let's start with what the dollars, the fiat, the Fed coupons that we have today. The central bank, which is the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor a reserve, because they're printing imaginary money. The only difference between a Fed coupon and a monopoly dollar is that the Fed coupon's a little bit harder to counterfeit. They're both backed by nothing, and if people thought the monopoly dollars had value, we could exchange in monopoly dollars, or we can go back to glass beads or black market. We don't have to use the fiat currency, right? It would kind of force you underground, you know, if they kind of force CBDCs. So there's one particular point I wanted to make, but and where CBDCs would ultimately probably lead is kind of some kind of a Blade Runner type or society or something where a lot of things that are of value are all black market as opposed to the government sanctioned version. But going back to the existing digital dollar that we have, which most dollars are digital. Like I said, there's over $20 trillion out there, but there's only about $2 trillion in actual cash floating around. So most of money already is digital, and that exists on a central bank, ledger, the Federal Reserve ledger, which is just a database that they have. So they know how many dollars are in circulation and how much they mint, or at least what they tell us that they do. And whether or not you believe any what they tell you is another question. But just like other forms of money that become inflated. But anyways, it's just a digital representation of what the Federal Reserve is issuing. But it doesn't have the programmatic controls or the smart contract type capability of something that would be a CBDC, which would be like blockchain. So like the spending limits or the time limits or control over what you can buy with the currency, with the digital dollar today, isn't necessarily controlled. Like they have regulations on which merchants can offer goods and which banks and institutions can issue licenses and can conduct and transfer of money. So there are regulatory controls around these digital dollars, but we still have the freedom to spend our cash and money as we mostly see fit today. That's not necessarily the case when moving to a central bank digital currency.
Yeah, precisely. The features that the CBDC have vastly, I mean, their tracking capabilities and surveillance capabilities vastly outweigh what the current system has. I mean, we all have the option to go to the bank and withdraw cash and then to transact privately. Cash is still, the best option for, or one of the best options for private transactions. But if we see that removal, then you don't even have that option anymore. So it is. There's a radical departure there between the two, and I think it's worthwhile making the distinction because I think some people just think it's all digital. Also,
Yeah,
that's what they'll do, by the way. They'll just take all the cash out of circulation, and you'll be forced to use the digital version of whatever they deem as.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Aldo, because that's the biggest difference is really you currently maybe have a digitized dollar, being that it's sitting on bank accounts and things like that. And it's zipping around. You're not actually using the physical bearer instrument to transact in cash, but you currently still always have the option to have an exit rail to physical cash, to the actual bearer instrument, and then to use it as you see fit in private. But that is completely eroded in any kind of CBDC format.
Yeah, it's eliminated, and then it can be tied to other social engineering and programs that the government wants to implement. I think this is sci-fi. Look at China. Look at social credit scores. Dig into that and see how that can be coupled with a CBDC, and then the possibilities get pretty real pretty quick.
They have the digital yuan in a wallet that they're trying to get some traction around as well already. So they already have the CBDC in trial in China.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that kind of makes me wonder, as far as like a security and privacy standpoint. Like if we were using central digital currency, would that be for government as well, or just the people, or those types of things? And if it was for the government, what's to stop someone from obtaining the wallet addresses and knowing everything that they're spending on? And I could see that being a positive in one way, so that we could, as a people, like audit everything they were spending. But even still, I mean, it's not enough of a positive to outweigh the negatives.
That's an interesting point that I don't really hear brought up often about whether or not it would provide transparency on the government side. But I would probably take the opposite argument, though, that they'd still find a way to do, just like currently, like exchanges do. You can't tell what the exchanges are doing internally with the left hand paying the right hand, because they still have the ability to keep, to just conduct ledger entries internally. It could just be that it sits in a reserve somewhere, and then all the internal spending and how it's used, it moves around somewhat discreetly internally. I'm not sure that it would give you the granularity that you would want, nor would you ever really be able to probably make that trade-off worth the expense on the people.
Yeah, I don't think that the transparency of the blockchain argument really works with the government. They've been able. I mean, the Federal Reserve, they've never been audited. So irrespective of what technology they adopt, I don't see them allowing themselves to be audited now, nor the government. And then also there's the question of like the centralization of power. So even if you were, as a citizen, able to sit there and decipher all this, and you saw where every dollar went, what does the citizen do at that point? Because at that point, all the power has been vertically integrated and centralized in the state. So they can just do whatever they want anyways. So, yeah.
Well, the Department of Defense has never passed an audit, and that doesn't stop them from getting more money or spending more.
Correct. Precisely.
Even the system now, we don't have audits. Don't mean anything.
Yeah. So the juice isn't worth the squeeze there, and it's CBDCs all the way around. Any way you slice it, they're bad for the citizen, and they are a wet dream for the ruling elite, essentially.
Especially if it stays in, excuse me, that spending model. I think about last week's episode during the Roman times, right, versus what's going on now, where we're seeing that's okay. We say spending, right? It's not just on nice to have things. This is must have, need things, food, gas, and other sorts of things, right? That baseline is continuing to go up. That basic need for people to just make it is becoming harder and harder. And it reminds me of the Roman times, where the politicians said, okay, like we're just going to make all the food really cheap and keep everyone happy because we have power and we're politicians and we're just going to buy us time. Well, it just feels like that's just a Band-Aid when you totally need to revamp the system. Like, how long is this going to last until that baseline is just so expensive that people actually give a crap? and do something about it. You know, what Aldo, you say you feel small, right? You know, what are the things you think that we can do to start making effect to not feel so small?
If that's a question directed at me, then exactly what we're doing, educating ourselves and our peer groups. It starts with education. I think there will be a generational change too. You're already seeing it in Congress with, you know, we do have some support in Congress, and I think that is likely to grow with age demographics changing in the ruling class, so to speak. Because the brilliant thing about Bitcoin is the game theory behind it, and it takes into account human psychology and greed, and people like money. So, you know, you get a younger, more sophisticated, ruling class. Essentially, you know, you're already starting to see that, and you're starting to see people that get it, hold office. So, I think I'm definitely not a pessimist, and I'm not like black-pilled and think that there's no hope. There is hope, but that's incumbent upon us to educate ourselves, educate our friends, our families, hold these spaces, and then also understand the risks and understand the moves that your opponent is going to make. This is why I'm for Bitcoin. This is why I'm for greater decentralization of everything. Open source and decentralization, I think, is the ultimate key. Whether that's operating in DEXs ultimately. I think that's our best option in the near term.
Definitely agree. We should be paying attention to a couple key things. You know, ultimately, money is just an instrument to allow us to purchase the goods that we need to be free and to be happy, right? And that's your necessities in life. The things that have true value are the things that we need. We need, shelter and food and clean water and air, right? And so you want to align yourself politically with those that are going to protect those things that are basic life necessities. They're going to be pro-business and creation of, self-sustainment. They're going to take strong, foreign policy in mind, making sure that we're not operating at negative deficits and that we are having sound economics and people that are anti-CBDC and pro-decentralized money. So that's one way we can do it, is demand that. We need legislators to pass anti-CBDC law, and that to be put into effect, headed off at the track before it can even exist, because we already have the programmable decentralized money. We already have the superior new technology to advance finance. We don't need governments to come in and try to build something inferior to what the private sector's already perfected or is in the process of perfecting. It's already better than anything they could build. So we need to make sure that that power stays in the private sector, and that the government sector keeps us safe, keeps our air clean, our water clean, our borders secure, and actually, focus on being producers of goods domestically, and that we're not shipping jobs overseas and being reliant on foreign powers. That's the security that we need from our government, and that's what we should demand from them.
It's all about trust, improving trust, and the idea of an automated audit system sounds wonderful to me. But I see we have a potential new speaker or question from Voyager of the Moon. What you got, man? How you doing?
Hey, pretty good, man.
You should
hear me?
Oh, loud and clear.
Just wanted to throw in something really quick. So I've noticed CoinGecko has their way that they display the VGX token is not accurate. For example, like say CoinMarketCap, they have a really good description of it.
Happy to answer that question, but we're kind of trying to stay on topic here. But if we get to a closing point, if you want to shoot me a DM, and we could pick this up once the narrative that we're talking through in history. Happy to. Don't mean to be rude and cut you off there. And
no worries. Yeah. I meant, I didn't mean to change the subject or nothing. Yeah, it's just something that's been on my. It's just something that's been on my mind.
Yeah, no problem at all. I just want to make sure that we wrap up this segment clean. And yeah, Obi-Wan, I apologize for interrupting you too with the CBDC definition, but I'm glad we kept the conversation rolling. It was an impulsive question.
No, it's fine. And we can get to the general EMA after the on-topic questions for sure. And I'd be happy to address that question that he had.
Perfect. So go ahead and shoot Obi a DM there to get it full. And we have another one. Also, guys, real quick, sidebar. If you don't know about captions for spaces, they really help at the top of your screen. If you click that and turn on view captions, whenever someone cuts in and out, you'll still be able to read what they say. So quick tip there. Rolo, I like that. Haha, Rolo, what's going on?
You got a question, Rolo?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I wanted to touch on the CBDC and also try to just bring it back to like what you guys were talking about first. So I work for an insurance company, brokerage, and it's so funny that you guys are talking about CBDC because while I'm working, I work for Medicare, and when you get to Medicare age, you can basically pick from private insurance or you can pick from the federal government. It's a big world insurance company, but some of these private insurance companies, what they're doing now, starting in 2021, from my experience, they give out like cards. They give out debit cards for food for people on Medicaid, and sometimes for people on regular Medicare. So like, I'm tying the dots where like these people are calling in, going online, looking for assistance. So, and there's a lot of people doing this. So I'm concerned too, because like, I'm not a big fan of the CBCD or the CBDC because there could be a lot of problems that come with that. But my question is if people are needing help so bad, and they're just not in a good place because of old age and they don't have the vitality anymore, like, is there any way to turn this CBDC into a instrument or a tool for people that aren't able to be productive in society?
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be a CBDC. If the government wanted to provide aid, they could send those people Bitcoin, or they could send those people, fiat derivatives of stable coins, right? And that would, work for the Medicaid or Social Security. The main key is that what we need to do is return to some form of reserve standard in order to make governments become smaller and more in check, and not be increasing our loss of freedom. Right now, we're giving up way too much, and if we can't get on a gold standard, then we need to opt out of the system and move to a private system. That's kind of how we fight back. But if governments get smaller and they have a need to take care of those in society that haven't done a good job of taking care of themselves, then that's where the new form of money we have can serve that purpose without a need for a CBDC.
Totally. And I mean, just from my experience of talking to these people, I mean, I talk to people all across the United States. I'm licensed in 37 states. So I get calls to help these individuals, and they have a marketplace where they can pick from, like United Healthcare, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, like all the top insurance companies. And it's just so surprising. I didn't realize, because none of us, as far as I can tell, I mean, everyone that I've listened to, everyone here is not at Medicare age. But you get to a point where you just can't like do anything. And like, CBDC may be like the last resort for some of these people. But I like what you said earlier about like the technology is already out there. So like my hope, I know hope is not a strategy, but my thing that I'm looking at is like if the government can really understand like the technology has been built already, like it's already been built out in the private sector, right? If they can incorporate that, you know, I mean, who are these people? Why are they trying to reinvent the wheel, right? The Bitcoin technology has already been proven, like it's steadfast. So it's going to be very interesting how it plays out, because people are going to think that the new money, digital currency, is CBDC, and they have no idea that Bitcoin, until they research it and go out and look for it, they're going to see that maybe CBDC is just as good. So, I mean, this is a very interesting topic. But going back to the beginning, yeah, I mean, this war is going to bring up a lot of, you know, people's awareness. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. I'll jump off and let you guys keep on going.
Yeah, I'll just say on the war front, you're seeing it already with the ruble dipping underneath a penny. You know,
Absolutely.
1 ruble is now under a penny, and they're, you know, and the sanctions are putting pain on imports and the ability to move money around, and people are quickly coming to the conclusion that, you know, keeping their money in centralized institutions that's government fiat, it's not really backed by anything, isn't really worth a whole lot. So what's the alternative to store your time and your purchasing power, right? And you're seeing, you know, the digital asset markets start to break away from some of the traditional investment, you know, based on what's going on in global events like what Frankie was talking about earlier. But in terms of what the government can do is, if we go back to some kind of form of sound money, you know, one of the biggest things we can do as a country, at least here, this doesn't apply just to the United States, but if you want to be a secure government and you want to be for the people, then you should be spending a lot of resources on increasing the hash rate and mining some Bitcoin, and then using that as the form of money to secure your country's future and have that as a reserve. Because there's 21 million Bitcoin, but there's like 21 quadrillion sats out there. There's enough sats to go around for the whole world many times over. And so if we want to have the new form of gold, like we have in, you know, Fort Knox, right? The United States has more gold than the next 3 or 4 countries combined. But that, you know, gold is outdated technology. So if we want to really be secure and we really want to form new money and we want to make it sound and have a government actually have a budget and be for the people, then money has to transition to a superior alternative. And that's what Bitcoin provides. And that's what we should be pushing our politicians to do and our corporations to do, is to start changing the sign in front of the numbers that we use to trade in to a B or an S that means something different than USD.
Yeah, and I think it's a good discussion too. And Obi, I appreciate you taking first crack at the answer there, because I honestly needed a minute to try to put my words together in a way that wasn't going to be just me expressing my own bias politically, and just address it substantively. So I would like to try to come at it from this angle. Whether you are so inclined or not to think that the government is a better tactician at spending your money than you are for philanthropy or assistance or aid, is irrelevant. At the end of the day, CBDCs as a tool would just be another vehicle with which to do that. And regardless of which tool is used, there's no such thing as free lunch. So in a version where you are so inclined to contribute such aid and have it distributed at the government level, the technology of a CBDC does not execute that in a way that creates new aid that is better suited to support people. So it's not like it's this magic pill that is going to distribute aid that didn't previously exist and create it, via fusion. It's still going to get paid from somewhere. It's just a different way of reconciling the ledger. So it's a different tool and a different vehicle, and the politics of who we aid, how we aid, whether the government should do it or not is a completely different beast. But the introduction of a CBDC is not just this magic elixir that is going to make it happen for people who weren't otherwise going to get it. It's not that solution, I don't believe, if that's what the inference was.
So we're early, and we're to this before a lot of corporations and large savings instruments like family offices and sovereign funds and even countries. So what happens when the floodgates open and everyone's has their aha moment and the countries start minting fiat like it's going out of style in a hyperinflationary nature, trying to get into Bitcoin? Can you imagine that? What's that look like, Michael?
Not pretty.
Not pretty for the laggards. Yeah. So,
yeah, I feel like regardless, I do feel like there's going to be a certain amount where the laggards are going to be the ones crying at the end of the day as if this was unfair, and then it's just going to be different targets as far as who everybody hates for having succeeded in whatever this next turnover in the economic system is going to be. There's always going to be those who are last to the party that are going to blame somebody else for why they were there, and there's going to be plenty that are last to the party because they didn't have the means or education to have been any sooner to the party. So there's always a mix of legitimacy and victims of their own circumstance, I guess, in that kind of a conversation.
Yeah, price is the best marketing tool, right? When it comes to crypto, people start seeing Bitcoin go to 100,000 and 500,000 and $1 million. They'll have their oh shit moment and start putting whatever they can to get whatever they can in.
Yeah, but I could be a shibillionaire for like 23 quid or whatever it costs. But unit bias, man. Don't I want more of something cheaper?
Yeah. I want all the schmeckles I can get.
It's amazing. All those people that'll buy meme coins all day long because they can become a quadrillionaire and feel all high and mighty. I don't see that same kind of vigor to go out there and buy the ruble today.
Nope. Why I try to get out of Fed coupons as quickly as possible.
Yeah, talking about the reticence to buy Bitcoin at 40,000 now, but then when the FOMO sets in, people be lining up, and we've all seen the meme, right, where it's like, name your asset, but usually Bitcoin for like whatever, like 10,000 or 20,000, then the next line over, and there's like one person in the line, and then the next booth over is like Bitcoin for like 100,000, like everyone's in that line. It's so true. It's just human psychology.
Very true.
We're creeping into it. Totally off topic, but I shut down all my Netflix and the Hulu and all that other stuff to buy more coin, and I couldn't say goodbye to NBA TV. I cannot watch a single game and not see a crypto commercial. I saw one about a crypto IRA today. So we're creeping. It's starting to happen. I noticed the NBA seems to be a bit ahead of the times in terms of other sports leagues. I don't think it's a coincidence at all that league has so much ties to crypto.
It's a player-run league, and the players are into it, so they're gonna, that's naturally going to be a partner. I cannot wait, and I hope so hard right now that Voyager is going to go heavy in March Madness. It seems like the track is laid. I want to see that put into action because I want that growth pool gone. Anyways, That's basketball related, so I digressed.
Oh, one more thing. I mean, shoot, don't tempt me. There was like 25 to 35 different schools that I forget. It happened a couple of months ago, and we saw all the different codes for it. All right, I'm going to stop.
January, yeah.
I like Vikings and basketball. My bad. Okay, guys, I'll let CBDC. Bad. Go ahead.
Well, I just canceled DirecTV, so I better be able to get some Sunday ticket or games somewhere. Anyone has any tips, let me know.
Probably not that I would want to share on a recorded spaces, but yeah, there's ways to do things.
Okay, do we have any other, just anyone who wants to request, hit the mic button in the bottom left, and feel free to come up and ask a question about money throughout history, fiat, CBDCs, or monetary metals, anything from previous sessions that we've had. If not, we can open the floor to other topics.
Aldo, I did see in one of our planning rooms that, I don't know if you threatened to or just offered to, but you said that you could go for an hour on 1913. I'm tempted to see you try. What you got?
Talk about Jekyll Island?
Well, to be fair, I said I think the topic we could go for an hour, but yeah, I'll give a crack at it. Yeah, so the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, and it was passed on Christmas Eve at around 11 o'clock p.m. And you'll start to see this whenever there's controversial legislation that's proposed. They usually pass it late at night when most Congress people are not available, and so that's exactly what took place then. And to expound on what Obi mentioned there, Jekyll Island, there's a great book called The Creature of Jekyll Island, and what that is it's a book that details the meeting between the major central banks that met, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all these private banks that met and cooked up the idea of the Federal Reserve Act. And essentially what they did was they convinced the United States government that they could better handle the money issuance and the boom bust cycles because, hey, we're bankers. We've been doing this for forever now. And they took away the power from the constitutionally that resided with the Treasury before. And you can look, in the U.S. has a long history of fighting off the idea of central banks and money issuance. But they were successful, and it was passed in the dead of night with, I think, maybe 6 votes, and we've been living with it ever since. Shortly after that was the personal income tax and the Social Security number to track you to make sure you paid your income tax. So it's a long history. We should actually maybe do like a session on that at some point. But for anybody that's interested, look up the Creature from Jekyll Island and really delve into the Federal Reserve, the fact that it is not federal. There's a bank. It is a central bank that's composed of private banks that are that have never been audited, and they're not federal or government entities at all. And as such, I mean, you can watch a really interesting interview with one of the former one of the former heads of the Fed when they asked what's the relationship between the Federal Reserve and the head of the Federal Reserve and the president. And the head of the Fed said, there is no relationship, frankly. We operate independently. So there's literally nothing that the president or Congress can really do. Well, Congress can do something with, allegedly. They could repeal it, but they operate independently and they guide monetary policy as they see fit. So
the only power they have is appointing the head, the governor, the chairman of the Fed.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it's a fascinating topic and one that should be familiar to, or anybody in the crypto space that really delves into like the fundamentals and why we are here, just beyond like money go up, number go up, really gets into the philosophy, then you should look into it.
Yeah, Andrew Jackson stopped a few attempts at a Federal Reserve because he understood the ethos of what the founding fathers were doing with and how money was originally put in as gold and silver, and the importance of life, liberty, and property. And
were there a couple of
Andrew Hamilton had a pretty good design, huh?
There were a couple of assassination attempts on Old Hickory there, but he was a mean bastard and pummeled him with his walking cane. So
yeah,
it's been alleged that the central bankers sent some guys after him.
Yeah, it's also alleged that the Federal Reserve or the central bankers were behind the assassination of JFK. If you want to go into that too, that's another one.
Yeah, he wasn't making many friends with going after the military-industrial complex, putting us back on the gold standard. Essentially nullifying the power of the Fed, and going after the CIA with his executive order. So there's a lot of people that weren't happy with JFK.
No, there were not a lot of people, but sometimes you have to do what's right. Don't always get it right all the time, but some people are on the right side of history. But anywho, yeah, lots of fun. We can do a whole side after session on that type of stuff too. But feel free if anybody has a question to come up. Those are good points to Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve not being federal, which we touched on a couple times tonight. Anytime that we give up any form of temporary measures to any form of government, it never remains temporary. Temporary for governments is permanent. Whether that be income tax, which was originally how the Civil War was funded, by taxing high net worth individuals. And then they said, that income tax, that's a pretty cool thing. I think we'll keep that. Let's expand that to everybody. There's many examples. The gold standard being left in 1971 was supposed to be temporary.
The Patriot Act.
The Patriot Act. Yes. Fighting terror. Why do we have to declare war on so many things? Well, so you can bypass acts of Congress. Yeah, it's definitely a corrupt system, and we should all be educated and learn as much as we possibly can about why things are the way they are and what we can do to be a counterbalance.
So speaking of why things are the way that we are, the way that they are, and on the topic of the Federal Reserve, can somebody go ahead and just better explain for the audience exactly the mechanism by which the Federal Reserve can create money? Like everybody gets the meme, right? Money printer go burr. But I don't think many actually understand the mechanism by which they are creating and introducing new supply. So would somebody be willing to take a jump ball on that one and explain to the audience exactly the process by which they do that?
Obi, you want to take that one?
In its simplest form, government says we can't keep our budget because we're horrible at being balanced, and we need more money to buy new cool things because we want to be reelected. And then they say, well, we don't have any more money. Let's raise the debt ceiling. We got to pay our debts. We got to keep paying these bonds, and we don't want to default on our payments, which, by the way, we did when we left the gold standard. Well, it was the first, or really the second time in history where we kind of defaulted on the world. The other time being 1933 with the Gold Act. But what happens basically is politicians say, yeah, let's raise the debt ceiling. Let's pay those bonds, and let's go to the Federal Reserve because we need more money. The Federal Reserve says, sure. How much would you like? They run up the money printer, go burr. And then the government says, thank you very much, Federal Reserve. Here's an IOU in the form of a treasury bond. and we promise to pay this back with interest. And then the Federal Reserve says, thank you very much, government, we'll take your IOU. And then they say, hey, we've got IOUs for sale. They come with a 1 or 2%, coupon interest, payment attached to them. Who wants to buy these? And then, because people want to have cash equivalents and reserves on their balance sheets, foreign countries typically buy that debt, and they own some currency with interest. And we then, those bills, those bonds mature, and then they have to be repaid. And then the government says, oh shoot, we stopped, we ran out of money again. We spent more than we took in, and now we have to pay these bonds are due. And they say, well, we can't cut things because we want to be reelected, so fire up the money printer again. And they go back to the Federal Reserve, and the cycle repeats.
Yeah, Obi, you made me think of something there. So when the Fed came in and said, "Hey, government, we'll do this. We're the professionals. We'll take this off your hands, and we'll manage it for you, but we're not going to do it for free." So previously, the U.S. government issued dollars or currency, right?
Yeah, there was two notes. There was a U.S. government note, Treasury note, and there was a Federal Reserve note. And they were both redeemable for gold when we had a gold standard. And when we left the gold standard in 1971, it went exclusively to Federal Reserve notes.
Yes, that's true. But what I wanted to touch on was the fact that the Federal Reserve said, "But we're going to do it for a fee." So there's going to be an interest rate that you're going to have to pay us for every dollar that we print, or issue. So whereas when the Treasury did it, they weren't, for every dollar that was created or whatever denomination at the time, there was no debt incurred. So what you see shortly after that is the need to be able to pay that off. How are we going to pay the Federal Reserve now? Because now we owe them money because they're handling and printing our money for us. So then you see the introduction of the personal income tax, which had not existed before, because at that point they were beholden to pay that debt to an autonomous central bank that was handling the monetary policy for the U.S. So that's why you see, the Personal Income Tax Act passed, and that's why you see a general decrease in wealth after 1913, and then the personal income tax, which I think was also in 33. So that's the thing. They're printing the money for us, but we have to pay them for the luxury of them printing it for us instead of the Treasury just issuing it. So that's huge. People.
Yeah, this is referred to shadow tax, right? We lose purchasing power through the inflation of the currency, and we also have to pay increased personal tax to the federal government so that they can fill their coffers, so that they can repay the reserve and pay for the bonds and pay for all the new stuff they want to pass because they promise us. So what we should all be asking them is, hey, stop spending. We want a positive surplus. We want you to balance the budget, and don't expand government, contract. And like we did, post World War II, when we had some great prosperity, when budgets were balanced, and we had a gold standard, and governments were held in check with that gold standard, where they've just been out of check for so long now. It's 50 years of being unchecked. And so when it's kind of fascinating because, after Nixon, there's a president or two in between, but when Reagan took over, the national debt was 800 billion. Hadn't even reached $1 trillion yet. When Biden took office, it was like 28 trillion. It's over 30 trillion today. Like he just had his first State of the Union, and we're already over 30 trillion. Now, almost every single president since Nixon has doubled the national debt. That's some facts for everybody. Anyhow, Frankie, you got it.
Yeah, just taking it back to basics, I think how does the Fed infuse the economy with liquidity, and and how does it take it out? I guess what maybe, and I apologize for, I'm trying to get it as basic as possible, but it's late in the night for me and I'm lacking on sleep. Basically, what they do to kind of infuse money is, there's the cabal of banks, right? The JP Morgans, the banks of America, and they get the access to the Fed, the Fed window. And pre kind of the financial crisis of 2008, the Fed had a lot more quote unquote tools at their disposal. Jesus. Here we go. So basically, when they want to infuse money into the system, they say, "Hey, banks, come into my room. I'll give you money at a Fed rate of 50 bips or what have you." And pre financial crisis, it was probably like I'd say on average 4%. So we would get mortgage rates at 6-7%, things of that nature. So basically, the Fed would give this money to the banks at prime rate of, call it 3%, 4%. Banks are spread businesses, so essentially what they do is take that money, give it to Joe Schmo for a mortgage on their house at 7%, and they get that spread between 4 and 7%. So that's the kind of the quick way of infusing, one way of infusing money into the market. And this is where like the Fed starts playing games, right? Because if they want the money to circulate quicker and people have a lower time preference, it's a domino effect, right? They lower the prime rate, and in turn banks give out money at a lower interest rate, and people take out second mortgages and loans to buy their Ferraris or whatever, thinking that these loans are always going to stay at a certain rate. Then where we get into trouble is some of these adjustable rate mortgages where the Fed's like, shit, the economy's getting a little hot, the prime rate's going up a little bit, and then that's what we kind of saw in 2008. The reason I say we had the Fed had more tools to their in their toolbox pre 2008 is they've already used up the interest rate tool, right? So they're basically at zero now. They've done the quantitative easing thing now. So fast forward to today, where inflation is supposedly only 6%. Well, what the hell are we going to do to defuse this ticking time bomb? Well, normally we would increase interest rates, but the amount of leverage that the economy has on right now would just tank the markets, and personally I'd see it tanking more than what we saw in 2008. That's why when I gave the current events talk earlier today, and stated that the Fed expects that they're going to try, or they're going to make it a soft landing. Never in history has there ever been a soft landing when the Fed tries to, again, defuse inflation.
Put your on. They say if there's a soft landing, you're going for a crash.
Yeah, exactly. You see the airplane just explode on the runway. So I guess making a long story longer, this is kind of the point of why historically the Fed could increase and decrease the prime rate given to banks, and the banks would distribute that money into the economy. now they've painted themselves into a corner where they've used these tools already. Unless we're talking about negative interest rates, which, as we saw in Europe, didn't work out too well. You really don't have a way to create a soft landing, at least as far as I can tell. But I'm happy for anyone to, like, teach me otherwise on the panel, or if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, Frankie, I just wanted to touch on the distribution and the injection, which you're talking about. Spot on 100%. So the Fed, gives money to the banks, and the banks distribute that. But if it was just to, people in need, that'd be a different story. But what we see is there's a preference given to certain industries and certain big players. So that was the case in terms of 08 and the housing market crisis, 100%. But when you look at, like, GM getting bailed out, and the auto industry, they're too big to fail. This concept of being too big to fail, that is anti-capitalistic. That's anti-free market. And what you see is the Fed gives preferential treatment to different industries, and so they end up bailing out. What do they end up bailing out? Major corporations, big box stores. If you want to look at COVID, Target, all these big box stores got bailed out, but your mom and pop restaurants did not. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here, and it is a corrupt system that is, there's an interplay between Wall Street and between the government and the Federal Reserve, and they pick who gets the lion's share of the bailouts, and then you get, as the citizen, a crappy little stimulus check of something that's not going to pay your rent for a month or two, and that's what you get. All right, but you're not too big to fail. The other ones are too big to fail. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
Yeah, and
it's almost as if they bail out the large corporations with huge coffers to donate funds towards political reasons that also employ maybe a shitload of voters towards certain.
Is a conspiracy theorist?
Seems
no collusion.
Seems like an odd path for a seemingly non-governmental, apolitical body, but what the fuck do I know?
We do not. Yeah, we don't have democracy. We don't.
That's why I always laugh
or capitalism.
When they say that the Fed is independent. I'm like, yeah, okay. On paper it is. I think for being intellectually honest, I mean, we just stated why it isn't. So
yeah, we don't really have true capitalism or true democracy here. People have been lulled into thinking that we do, but as Baroness likes to say, we're just all frogs being slowly cooked in a pot. They just turned the temperature up, after leaving the gold standard. The inflation is the increasing the temperature. The water temperature is getting hot, and eventually it's going to boil over. And because they don't have the tools of being able to really mess with the interest rates to the downside, and they can't curtail the inflation because of the amount of money that's been injected, they have to slow. You have to slow the velocity of money, and you have to, raise interest rates to cause certain markets to not perform as well. So what they essentially have to do right now to get things back in order is they have to trigger a recession. But in order to trigger a true recession and allow things to kind of heal, they need to not do bailouts, and they need to actually allow the free market to behave as a free market and have winners and losers. And who thinks that's going to happen? No, most likely what will happen is we're stuck in. I think we're already in it. We're in stagflation. We're in a moment where we have a contracting economy and inflation, and so that's the worst place to be in.
Yeah, and kind of the quagmire here is that what a lot of people aren't aware of is that oil. Okay, so oil's been for the last 10 years between 40 and 60 bucks. And it's put a lot of oil companies up and down kind of the production line out of business or on the verge of out of business. And the only thing that's kept some of these bigger guys kind of on the brink is these low interest rates. So, you know, that's kind of the other piece of it, is that if, you know, yes, we have to raise interest rates, but fuck, now we have oil at $110 a barrel. What's going to happen once a bunch of these other producers, you know, go out of business because they can't service their debt anymore, and they file for Chapter 11. So going into, you know, midterm elections, you know,
it's too big to fail all over again, because it's you know, energy and money are the, you know, time and energy, right? Thermodynamics and money, right? You know, you know, energy right now is largely petro, right?
Yeah.
So they have to. I mean, that's actually a matter of national security. Unless we can produce more than we consume, we have to. You know, that's why we fought wars in recent history, and we need to be very cautious about that. But yeah, it's not looking too terribly good for like your traditional instruments. And again, this is the reason why we need, you know, if people want to make money and they want to opt out and they want to vote with their dollars or their feet, you know, digital assets are that outlet. So, because you don't want to be keeping your money in the bank if they come and say, hey, you know, the only way out of this is to raise taxes on the middle class. We hate to do it, but, you know, here everybody's getting a tax hike because we need to fill the coffers to pay the debts.
Or there's a haircut, Obi. Like just
yeah, well, haircut. It's just the dollars go less, and we, you know, the lifestyle that we've been able to enjoy since Bretton Woods, you know, comes crashing down, and we get a reality check like the rest of the world has. And you know, we're no longer going to be given $1 trillion worth of goods in excess every single year on our import exports, right? We consume over $1 trillion more than we produce, and a lot of what we consume are commodities that are necessary to sustain life. And what you export is services and software and intellect. So we need to get back into manufacturing, food production, actually producing goods in order to help the economy. And that's what we should be focusing on. American first, buy American. You know, reduce your spending. Go into digital assets. Like this should all be the avenues we should be pursuing in order to get out of the mess that we're in. And then, of course, unelect every incumbent. Fresh blood, new system, new laws.
Exactly. We've got to do all that, and we have to produce locally. I mean, if anything, we've seen the supply chain issue. We need to produce in this country, but also locally. I mean, most states get their produce shipped in from other states. And because of just-in-time delivering and lean Six Sigma type approaches that businesses have adopted, most grocery stores do not have, you know, robust supplies in the back. They only have enough to get through that week. Okay, so we need to be producing locally, and we need to encourage that, and we need to bring back in industry and heavy industry back to this country, which was exported in the 90s. And we need to bring that back. I agree with all of what you said, Obi. I just wanted to add.
Why do you think Bill Gates is buying farmland? Smart guy.
Yep.
Yeah, I will put one asterisk out there. Just this is where digital assets come into play, and I know that's been said a couple times as we got to the later part of the session. Specifically, though, this is where certain digital assets come into play. So at this point, we're at the tail end of the second hour of the 5th episode of the curriculum-driven content that we've been putting out there, but we haven't built up for 10 hours for the digital assets that come into play here to be confused with crypto dick butts and Squid Game token and every other bullshit that maybe looks like it's going to do a 10,000x, and the next thing you know, you get rugged by a YouTuber.
Michael, Floki Intro is where it's at, buddy. Floki Intro.
Yeah.
Hey! I didn't know about it. Okay, I didn't
It
know.
was banned by regulators in the UK today, so I had to bring it up. Anyways.
Yeah. So let's not forget what certain assets are trying to do, what certain assets are capable of doing, and what certain assets are really just a game of musical chairs. And if you're there to play great or fool theory, by all means, go for it. No one's dissuading, and this isn't financial advice, but let's not conflate the two, because there's drastically different extremes of the spectrum in the digital asset space. They're not all created. 99% of them are not created even remotely capable of, withstanding their own weight should they actually get to the return that most people want to see in them. So it's a very rarefied air as far as something that will survive through this. And it's, I'm not going to go complete Bitcoin maxi there, but just really just filter out the ones that are just complete horse shit.
I'd say it's 99.99. There's if there's 17,000 assets out there and probably only 100 worth owning, it's at least 99.5 out there that aren't worth owning. But yeah, choose wisely.
Well, should we answer that one gentleman's question that is not part of the 99.99, aka VGX, aka I think we have moon mode, by the way, for some people right now.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. But Obi, do you want to answer that question? Is our guy even here? But we're recorded, so is it a quick one? I know we only have 2 minutes left. Maybe we should do our final close here. Did he DM you with the question?
No, I've answered it a few times, but on Spaces, but I'll answer it again. So the question is on CoinGecko or like CoinMarketCap, why is the chart wrong? And Lord Aragorn is a very good proponent of trying to reach out to these businesses to get things corrected. But the answer is, the quick answer is that the VGX 2.0 token that has existed since September of 2021 is different than everything that precedes that date, which was a combination of the former Bitcoin's Ethos EQX VGX 1.0 and the LGO token from the Legolas exchange. Those two things merged in a coin swap, and that was executed at the end of August and through September of 2021. And the VLP started at that point in time with the new VGX 2.0. So different supplies, different businesses, different utility prior to September 2021. So really, if you want to look at the charts, it's mostly looking at September 21 forward. And yeah, I can follow up with any DMs or any other Twitter calls if you want to catch me.
Now let's hope that he goes to Crypto Airborne's channel and watches the recording and gets his answer. And we're at the last minute here, so I think we should go around the horn and say our closing thoughts, unless there's anyone on the panel that has something unrelated to closing thoughts that they'd like to get out before we do.
I'm glad we got to Fed coupons today, and we got through a little bit of history in the Americas and discussed the very real threats of our current and present economy and any future threats in regards to central bank digital currencies. I think it was a good discussion, and I believe, Michael, what are we doing next week? Is it 1971, what WTF happened 1971.com and the preceding socioeconomic situations that follow?
Yep. Yeah. Next week we will go to what the fuck happened in 1971 and then look at the fallout after that point. So, and the ripple effect that it's had throughout many aspects of our culture that aren't seemingly tied to monetary policy, yet the results certainly seem to be correlated.
I think that's really going to hit home for a lot of people. Putting things next to crypto that you wouldn't, and economic policy and money that you really don't think about, like, divorce rate. So Things like that. It's very interesting stuff when you look at the numbers. So let's go around the horn. Frankie, why don't you say goodnight to everybody?
Yeah, thanks, Floki. Yeah, I hope this shed some light on how the Federal Reserve infuses cash into the economy. Just one final point that I want to make. Whenever a government or the U.S. government gives you a stimmy, just it's very suspect. Just that point that Obi said about the $1,200 stimulus checks that we got way back when, it's probably worth around $800 now. So, and that was only 18 months ago. So yeah, I mean, that's, but we'll learn more about that next week, I guess. But this was fun. I love the organic conversations that we're having, and you know, we're all here to learn something.
We appreciate you, Jack Nicholson, Frankie, for keeping us up to date with all the macroeconomic factors going on each week. It's really awesome. Love the news bit. Aldo, what's up, man? Or do you want to say good night, man, to the rest?
Thanks, Floki. Yeah, I just want to say thanks for everybody. Thanks to everybody for coming out. I love covering the international news and foreign affairs bit, and I agree with what Frankie said. I enjoyed the organic discussion tonight. I think it's a topic that many of us are very passionate about, and I think it's important to add that that piece, specifically this time in history. And I had a really good time tonight. So I thank everyone on the panel that contributed, and I thank everyone that came out to listen to us and learn.
Yeah, man, and appreciate you. And I think it's so cool that you're literally going through foreign affairs for foreign affairs and looking at outside sources. I think that's awesome. Michael, go ahead.
As usual, I just appreciate everybody coming out and dedicating their time to spending these nights with us too, because I know that this isn't your normal social circle. So this isn't just your hoorah spaces and rally the troops and promote. So these are pretty niche, and we know it. But the folks that come out and dedicate 2 hours of their Wednesday nights, and if you're on the East Coast, stay on till 10 o'clock at night to try to better your understanding and learn this stuff. It's noted and it's appreciated, and we hope to be able to keep bringing these forward. And I appreciate the panel members that have really just stepped up incredibly over these past few weeks to deliver. The volume of content that we're trying to deliver is increased exponentially from what we were doing prior to the new year. So we wouldn't be able to do it without the team of guys all putting in the time. And Obi, tonight, I'm glad we finally got to build up to what you were waiting for. So I'm glad we finally got to it for you, and I appreciate you kind of running point this week and very well taking the floor. I know this is second nature for you because you're in spaces constantly, but I appreciate you holding it down for us tonight and delivering this piece.
Oh, sure. No, you're welcome. Anytime we get to talk about those lovely Fed coupons, death sticks. So anyways, yeah, definitely. If anyone was curious on learning more about evaluating coins, or having questions about what it is they're buying and whether or not it hits some of these principles of money, feel free to go to the Discord and open up discussion. We've got channels that are Voyager specific or altcoin specific, or whether you want to talk mining or staking or DeFi, just come on and hang out and ask questions, and we're happy to continue the learning outside of this Wednesday night session. So I wanted to put that out there. And again, Crypto Airborne, thank you for the recording, and also Terra Spaces. And have a good rest of your night, everybody.
Yeah. Don't let Michael fool you, guys. He does a ton of legwork and puts an insane amount of effort into this space. So Michael, thank you so much for everything that you do as well. And Obi-Wan, tonight was awesome. There were several moments where it just really resonated with me. And the devil's in the details. So, appreciate your passion and your willingness to share it, especially around this topic. This was probably one of my more favorite education spaces that I've experienced so far. But I would like to give the floor to Sun Tzu to close us out under the account. I am Floki, and strength and honor, everybody. Peace out. Sun Tzu, why don't you take us home?
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
May the force be with you. Adios.
Bye, y'all.